All right, folks. So this is a blockbuster story, and it has blown up on Twitter. And I'm already seeing. Look, this is the bellwether for me in terms of will this scandal surrounding and now implicating the highest reaches of the Christie administration. And we should note, Christie, in response to this revelation, canceled a public appearance today. Maybe it was because he was stuck in traffic, just to give him the benefit of the doubt. But I clicked on a Chris Klizza link, which I never do.
This really is a major story.
Yes. From the Washington Post, and even he had like 3 really important questions that Chris Christie answers, because Chris Klizza seems to be like sort of like dead in the demo that loves Chris Christie, right? The conventional wisdom, Beltway, Joe Scarborough appearing type of political reporter. And he thinks this could be a problem for Chris Christie. And this is going to be a big problem for Chris Christie. Make no mistake about it. This will have tainted Chris Christie's reputation with his most important demographic, which, of course, is that Beltway media. I don't know. Well, group thinker, as it were. Group wanker. And not that they actually deep inside themselves care, but it just becomes harder for them to defend Chris Christie as just a guy who gets things done.
He does just get things done.
But apparently he does.
Yeah,
it's just
he's
some
actually
of them.
more effective than I realized.
And remember what this story was about. Chris Christie was determined to win in New Jersey, not just by 5 or 10 points or 20 points, but he wanted to win by such a massive margin that it would help his narrative going into the 2016 presidential elections. Recall, too, that he spent millions of dollars in state funds to ensure that that would happen by insisting on a special election to fill Frank Lautenberg's seat to take place less than 30 days before the scheduled election, so that he would not have to face any influx of Democratic voters who were going out to vote for Cory Booker. So that's item number 1. Now, that's not illicit. That's not an abuse of his powers, at least from a statutory standpoint. But it is grotesque when you think about the cuts that have taken place in New Jersey to infrastructure, to teachers, that you would spend millions of dollars just to ensure that you got an even bigger, fatter padding, if you will, on your election. And then the other project that he was engaged in to ensure that he would have this massive win so that he could be propelled into the 2016 elections was to round up as many Democratic politician endorsements as possible. Now, some say that one of the ways in which he did that was by handing out Sandy aid to people who did not necessarily, or to jurisdictions who did not necessarily really need aid because of Sandy, but to ease some of the budget cuts in some places. And Buono, the Democratic challenger, Barbara Buono, the Democratic challenger, certainly said that too many of her fellow Democrats, party bosses, cut deals with Christie. Well, apparently, one of the politicians who was not willing to endorse Chris Christie, a Democrat, the mayor of Fort Lee, was a man named Mark Sokolic, who apparently is Serbian. You will see why this is relevant as we talk about this Bergen County record story. Apparently, there was one other mayor who would not endorse Chris Christie, and that was Jersey City Mayor Stephen Fulop, who also said that he was the victim of some type of retribution because he would not endorse Chris Christie. Remember, we're talking about Democrats now. You all know the story of how the access ramp to the George Washington Bridge coming from Fort Lee was shrunk from 3 lanes to 1 lane, causing miles-long traffic jams through Fort Lee on the first day of school in September of 2013. And the implications that could have existed. We have no reports of anyone dying because first responders couldn't get through these traffic jams. We know that havoc was wreaked on the first day of school at Fort Lee. And we know that this is the most traveled bridge in the country on a daily basis. And we also know that Chris Christie says he's not been thinking about this. What are you making a big deal? Yeah, I was out there with the cones. None of this is real. It's all being made up. Even though now we've had, up to 3 officials. His hand-picked buddy, high school buddy, who was a former blogger, David Wildstein, who was given a record dollar figure for the position he was hired for. We know it's a record because that position didn't exist until Chris Christie decided, we need a guy like this here.
Gets things done.
Gets things done. So reading from the piece by Sean Boberg in the Bergen Record, a cache of private messages between Governor Christie's deputy chief of staff and his 2 top executives at the Port Authority reveal a vindictive effort to create traffic problems in Fort Lee. Apparent pleasure at the resulting gridlock and insults used to refer to the borough's mayor who had failed to endorse Christie for re-election. The documents obtained by the record also raise serious doubts about months of claims by the Christie administration that the September closures of local access lanes to the George Washington Bridge were part of a traffic study initiated solely by the Port Authority. Instead, they show that one of the governor's top aides was deeply involved in the decision to choke off the borough's access to the bridge, and they provide the strongest indication yet that it was part of a politically motivated vendetta. A notion that Christie has publicly denied. Who, me? I added the who, me part. Bridget Ann Kelly, one of the 3 deputies on Christie's senior staff, wrote to David Wildstein, the top Christie executive at the Port Authority in that newly minted position, on August 13th, about 3 weeks before the closures. She writes, Michael?
Time for traffic problems in Fort Lee.
No, she wrote, time for some traffic problems in Fort Lee.
Oh, pardon.
And
I thought I was reading Wildstein on that one. My mistake.
Wildstein writes back, got it. Now, understand something, too, that's fascinating about this. Is this close top aide to Governor Christie and his hand-picked longtime high school chum were texting back and forth on private accounts and on private email accounts, as if they thought that this could never be subpoenaed. And in fact, I think some Republican operative tweeted today, like, boy, these guys don't know their trade craft. The private messages indicate that Kelly, a senior staff member in the governor's office, was involved in the planning and received updates during the week of the traffic jams. She was also informed that week that Christie's executives at the Port Authority were ignoring the Fort Lee mayor's desperate attempts to get a reason for the sudden announced closures. As the borough's first responders struggled to respond to emergencies and buses arrived late on the first day of school. On September 9th, this is the first morning of the closures, Kelly wanted to know if Fort Lee Mayor's Mark Sokolich's numerous calls to the Port Authority officials had been returned. So she became aware that the mayor was freaking out and wanting to know from the Port Authority, what's going on here? We've got first responders stuck in traffic jams. We've got kids going to school. Wildstein responds, radio silence. His name comes right after Mayor Fulop. This was a reference to that same Jersey City Mayor Stephen Fulop, who had said earlier this week that the Christie administration retaliated against him for not endorsing Christie by canceling all his meetings with top state officials. Now, what is interesting about the release of these documents today is that Wildstein is scheduled to testify about the documents under oath. And I believe it's the first time he'll be under oath in front of a state lawmaker panel tomorrow. Now, what would have been interesting to see is if he was under oath and he was brought there and this stuff hadn't been released and he didn't know.
And they took him on a nice little walk out to perjury charge.
Exactly.
It's like, hey, Davey.
In fact,
why don't you come this way, buddy?
I'm not convinced, frankly, that this wasn't leaked by who has these subpoenaed records, right? To give them to the Bergen Record. It's not clear where they came from.
It could be someone in the administration.
Or it could be a Republican on this committee.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah, especially that these are coming from their personal email accounts makes it extra.
Well, they were subpoenaed.
But it makes it extra easy for them to scrub this stuff, though.
Well, not once it's subpoenaed. I mean, apparently these things live on.
Let's get to this next great section. Am I Wildstein or unknown?
Well, now here's what's interesting, because I've seen other people attribute this conversation differently, but this is coming from the Bergen Record. Who do you want to be?
I think Michael, if unknown is who we think it is, Michael should be unknown.
You want to be unknown or you want to be Wildstein?
You know what? I'll be Wildstein.
Okay.
It'll be fun.
So this is an exchange of text messages on the second day of the lane closures. Wildstein goes back and forth, and he's talking about the messages from the Fort Lee mayor. And know that they refer to this guy sometimes as Serbia because he's Serbian.
It's a nice little touch, a little gratuitous racism.
And the messages, the mayor had been sending phone messages and leaving messages, and no one was responding to him, apparently. As we stated earlier, radio silence. He's in line after Mayor Fulop. So Wildstein sends a text, and we don't know to whom at this point, because apparently that was redacted in the documents. Now, we don't know who redacted this stuff.
Who is unknown?
We don't know who is unknown. But, and it turns out he's not even Serbian, the mayor. He's Croatian.
That makes it even better.
Okay? Whatever, Serb, Croat, what's the difference?
Hey, they're all killing each other over there and eating lamb anyway, aren't they? Hey, whoa.
Okay, so the recipient of the text message responds to Wildstein. Maybe it's a woman. It could be Kelly. Is it wrong that I'm smiling? Or maybe it's not a woman. Maybe it's a guy.
Maybe it's a male Bruce Springsteen fan who has an overinflated national reputation and is a hack.
We don't know. Is it wrong that I'm smiling? The recipient of the text message responded to Wildstein.
Wildstein. No.
I feel badly about the kids. I guess.
That's the unknown.
Back to Wildstein. They are the children of Buono voters.
It's Buono, but okay.
Buono, Bono, Bono. Oh!
Serbian Croat,
Serbian
give me a break.
Croat. What is this? An ethnic sensitivity course? Oh!
Now,
I'm a blogger.
This is key because we do not know who that redacted person on the other end of the text is. Now, I've seen reports that have switched this exchange, where Wildstein's the one who's saying, I feel badly about the kids, and supposedly it's Kelly who's saying the opposite. Wow. But I'm going by the Bergen Record, which broke this story. And who that redacted person is going to be pretty key. Now, let's continue on. At one point, former Deputy Executive Director Bill Baroni, who was one of Wildstein's buddies, starts to freak out a little bit because suddenly they start getting calls and texts from reporters. And Baroni, now understand, a couple of days after this, they start to try and create a paper trail that this was all about a traffic study. But of course, this sort of came in late. So Baroni is called to testify under the legislative panel that was investigating. And he was not under oath at this time, you'll recall. So Baroni wanted to know how the governor's office thought he performed during his November 25th testimony. And so Baroni writes to Wildstein, what do you think? And Wildstein writes back, this is number 6.
Number 6. You did great.
Baroni, in response, wants to know what they say at Trenton, i.e. the governor's people. Trenton feedback?
Good.
Just good? Oh, shit. Now, to be fair to Baroni, whose feelings were pretty hurt because he went out on a limb even though he wasn't under oath, Wildstein later clarified that 3 people in Trenton thought he did great. So this is pretty damaging stuff because, like I say, Wildstein is going to testify under oath tomorrow. He knows that there is redacted, that at the very least, the other side of that text is redacted. So somebody has the record. Now, I don't know if Christie is texting back and forth with him, but they're going to ask him who was there. Who was that person? And he's going to say, I don't remember. But
who was on the other side of that dickish text exchange?
Exactly. Drip, drip, drip. At least somebody was sort of, I guess, worried about the kids. This is really bad for Christie.